Hi, today we're going to talk about this. This is the Relio. It's a small USB LED light, currently on Kickstarter as a project. It's made in Italy and it can be used for either product photography, food photography, macro photography, and a few other uses. So let's start by looking at the functionality and the design of the unit. Okay, so let's have a look at the Relio. As you can see, this is a fairly small unit. It's entirely made out of aluminum. The entire construction is made out of aluminum. You have this cooling fins on the back of the unit on two sides. So here you don't have anything, and on the bottom you don't have anything. This doesn't come with the unit. This is something that we have added just to hold it. Here you have a 1/4 inch 20 mount for basically putting things like this, or a tripod, or this is something that you can actually put on your camera, and we've used this on our camera, or light stand, or basically anything else. And on the back you have the micro USB plug, and you get this cable. Again, this is probably something that they will slightly change in the finished or the commercial version, because this cable is not as flexible as we would like it to be. So we talked to Relio, and they confirmed that the finished cable will be slightly more flexible than this one. But we have used this successfully. It's not very long, but you can get your own micro USB cable if you like. So this is in terms of the unit itself. On the front, as you can see, there are 4 hex or basically screws that you can use with this Allen wrench that you get with the unit. Basically, you simply open them, and they allow you to, we're not going to do this because it takes about 2 minutes, but they allow you to replace this lens. And you get 2 lenses, one inside the Relio itself and another one in the box. And there are 2 lenses. One has a focusing beam of with an angle of about 31 degrees, and there is a narrower one. So the wider one, which we are currently using on this, has an angle of beam of 31 degrees. This is not very wide, but again, it's wider than this, and it's good for some situations. Again, it's not something that will allow you to light something which is very wide. So it really depends on what you're shooting. We're going to show you a few demonstrations later on in this video. So let's talk about the light itself, the quality of light and the power of the LED light that comes within the Relio. So a few general specifications in terms of wattage. This is 3.75 watt LED. So this is the LED that comes in the Relio itself. Now it does produce quite a bit of heat. Now, after using it for half an hour, or surely an hour, it does get hot. It does get hot to the touch, but it's not too hot that you actually can't handhold it. So this is something to keep in mind. Maybe if there were fins, cooling fins from all directions, the cooling would be slightly better. But again, it's not something that you can't hold even after an hour or more. So this is one thing to keep in mind. Now, other than the actual power, it's rated at about 500 lux at 1 meter. And in terms of the color rendering, it's either 92 CRI or 96 CRI. This version, I think, is the 96 CRI. There are basically 3 types of LEDs, or 3 types of Relios. This is basically the warmest this has the warmest light. We're going to show you in a second. It's about 3000 Kelvin, which is what Relio recommends for most users. There is a 3500 version, 500 Kelvin version, and 4500 Kelvin version. So basically 3 versions to choose from, a warmer light or slightly cooler light if you like. So this is basically everything that you have in terms of the light itself. Let's turn it on and basically connect it to a USB cable. We have here, let's move this aside. We have a USB battery here, which you can use to power the light. So as you can see, we're not going to shine this on the camera itself because this will be very, very strong. But this is the color of the light. And from our testing, the colors that this produces are very good. We don't have the ability to actually test. We don't have something that can test the CRI exactly. There are some devices on the market that does test the CRI, but they're quite expensive. But from our testing, at least in terms of shooting subjects and then looking at the image quality and the colors in Photoshop later, the colors were fairly good. Now, in terms of if you want to dim this doesn't have a built-in dimmer. So this is something that you have to remember. It doesn't also have any on and off switch. And the reason for both things is basically that we've talked about to Relio about this. They wanted to produce something which is as straightforward, as simple, as basic as possible for their first product. And something that will also last for a long time. Now, for this reason, they also didn't include a built-in battery. They could have created a LED light with a built-in battery, but what they explained to us is that if you do add a lithium-ion battery, let's say something like this is a small battery that can power the Relio, and we've used it to power the Relio quite a few times when using it. The problem is that these types of batteries typically die after half a year, maybe a bit more, and they wanted to actually produce something that will last for years and years. And the Relio itself, as it is, should last for a long time because the only thing that it has is basically some electronics and the LED itself encased in this very strong aluminum box. So you don't have, again, apart from the LED and some of the electronics, anything that can actually die. Batteries, lithium-ion batteries, do die, as you know from smartphones and other electronic devices, do die quite often. So what you can do in this case is basically use any old external battery, and if it dies, simply replace it, and you don't have to replace the Relio itself. Still, we would like to see in the future a version of an external battery that will fit specifically the Relio and won't be connected using, for example, a cable, a micro USB cable, but will plug specifically into this part and maybe extend from the back of the Relio, and then you will have one unit that you can take anywhere with you, and if it dies in the future, the battery, you can simply replace the battery with a new one, and the Relio itself will continue to work as before. So this is just our suggestion. We talked to Relio about this, and this is something that they might consider for the future. So this is in terms of the battery. Now, in terms of dimming and the on-off switch, again, on-off switch is something that maybe they can add if they will ever produce a battery. Dimming has all sorts of effect on the quality of the light. So this is something that they didn't want to compromise. They wanted the best quality of light and the best power that they can produce in this small form factor. And they didn't want to reduce the quality of life by adding a dimmer. So this is their their concept of producing this. So this is basically it. Now what we want to do now is talk about a different, maybe slightly similar light that we've been using for some years now. This is the Ballad Pro. The Relio is produced, designed and produced in Italy. It's actually manufactured in Italy. The Ballad Pro was developed and manufactured in Germany. And as you can see, they're about the same size. We're going to talk about them in a second, but as we've discovered, they're quite different and not necessarily competing products. You can use both of them for different purposes if you like. So let's do a quick comparison. Again, not necessarily the same product, but interesting to compare. So let's do a quick comparison between the Ballad Pro and the Relio. We put them both on small stands. Now let's talk about the actual specifications. So we mentioned the Relio, it's about 3.75 watts. The Ballad Pro is just 1.25 watts from what we can deduce from the Ballad Pro website. So it's much weaker in general output. You can see this in the lumens as well. The Relio is about 500 lumens, while the Ballad Pro is about 125 lumens. So again, it's less powerful. From what we understand, the LED itself is older. Obviously, the Ballad Pro is an older design, so this is to be expected. In terms of the color of the light, the temperature, this specific Relio is about 3000 Kelvin. There are basically less warm versions up to about 4500 Kelvins. The Ballad Pro, at least this one, is 6500 Kelvin, so this is a much cooler light than the Relio. Now in terms of the angle of the light, and this is possibly one of the most important things, the Relio can come at either 31 degrees or a narrower beam when changing this lens. The Ballad Pro has just one angle. You cannot change anything in this respect, and it's about 70 degrees, so it's much wider. So it's a different type of light, and interestingly, if you look at the design itself, the front element, it has a lens which is curved. It actually goes quite outside the design, the housing of the LED. So it means that you can put some things, filters or gels in front, but they won't be straight up like with the Relio. It's not a very big problem, but it's just the way it works, and this gives it a very wide angle. And this is mostly the reason why we don't see both of them as really competing directly with each other, because some users might need the more wider angle lens, and other people would actually want to use something which is more focused. So again, this is why we don't see them as competing products. Now, another interesting difference is the actual connection. Now, initially we thought that they are both USB powered devices, and they are. But what you have to keep in mind is that the Ballad Pro, for some reason, is a mini USB, while the Relio is a micro USB. Now, we talked to Relio about that, and they explained to us that the advantage of the micro USB, which is the same port that you have on smartphones, tablets and other devices, mobile devices, is actually much better for connecting and disconnecting many times than the mini USB, which is a problematic kind of port. And we actually discovered this while trying to connect the Relio to external batteries or to the power, using a USB connector. In many cases, the connector itself basically failed. It's not that it failed, but it has connection problems. So you need to actually squeeze this in, and sometimes there is this connection got a bit loose and the light stopped. And this was a problem that we discovered after using this for a few months. This is something that we didn't see on the Relio, and from what the Relio people explained to us, even if it will happen, and this is unlikely, you can simply switch the cable, because the connectors which can fail are on the cable and not inside the connector in the Ballad itself, in the Ballad Pro itself, or in the Light itself. So this is a big advantage for the Relio, and again, this is maybe the biggest drawback that we find on the Ballad Pro, because we've used it for almost 2 years now, and it works, other than the connection issue, it works very nice. So very nicely. So the Relio doesn't seem to have this issue. As you can see, the connector here is on the side, and on the Relio the USB connector is on the back. I'm not sure how much of a difference this makes, but what is different is the fact that the Relio itself, the Ballad Pro itself, has a magnetic, very strong magnet in the back, which allows it to be connected to other things. So it comes with a plate, a metal plate, which it can connect to, and then you can connect the plate to anything that you like. This is something that you don't have on the Relio. So just one thing to keep in mind. Now, finally, in terms of the pricing of both units, the Ballad Pro is much more expensive. We're talking about 3.5 times the price. So it's really a big difference. We would say that, you know, each user need to pick whatever unit is right for him or her in terms of mostly the power itself, the color, and the angle of the light, which is, in our view, the biggest difference between the two units. Okay, so we are currently outdoors, and we want to show you a quick demonstration of the power of the Relio. Before we do that, we want to show you, just for comparison's sake, two regular flashlights. So this is a headlamp, as you can see, pretty small. We're at a distance of about 2 meters. So this is how it looks. We're shining it into a wall. You can see that this has a pretty cool light. So this is one. The second thing that we want to show you is this flashlight. And as you can see, you can increase and decrease the size of the light. So this is pretty small, and if you like, you can increase the size until it becomes pretty big. Again, the quality of the light is not necessarily very good, but this is a fairly powerful, inexpensive flashlight. It's powered by 3 AAA batteries. So these are just for comparison's sake. Now let's look at the Relio. So what you're going to see in a second, this is the power that the Relio has at a distance of about 2 meters. So as you can see, with 31 degrees, the lens that the Relio currently has, with 31 degrees, it's pretty uniform, and the size that it's able to shine, it's pretty large. But you're probably not going to use it from this distance unless you're using it maybe for video, just as an addition or something of that sort. So this is with the first lens. Let's look at how the second, more concentrated lens looks on the Relio. So it took us about 2 minutes to switch the lenses. Here in the dark, maybe a bit more. Let's look at the more concentrated lens. So here it goes. Again, from about 2 meters, you can see the difference of the color between the flashlight and the headlamp and the Relio, which is much warmer than the previous two. So this is the narrow beam. Now let's look at the narrow beam from a closer distance. So this is the Relio with a more focused lens, more concentrated lens, from a distance of just under 1 meter or about 3 feet. Pretty concentrated, as you can see. Now let's look at the second lens. So this is the Relio with a wider lens, a 31 angle degree lens, from a distance of just under 1 meter or about 3 feet. Finally, this is the Ballard Pro that we've talked about before, from the same distance, just under 1 meter or 3 feet. As you can see, the light is very different, both in terms of color and in terms of the spread on the wall. As you can see, it's much wider, but from the looks of it, it's weaker. So there are very different lights, as we have mentioned, not necessarily competing, but just different and useful for different purposes. So let's from here go to the conclusion and see what we think in general about the Relio, its price, and a few other things. Okay, so what do we think about the Relio? Well, this was a fairly quick hands-on first review of this unit. We've tested it for just a short while, but from our experience, this is quite a useful LED. What we have been able to do with this was to shoot basically macro photography, some food photography, and a few other things. Now, in terms of functionality, it functioned very well. It's small, it's light, it's compact. It can be powered using any sort of USB battery like this one or a larger one. You have to remember that if you're going to use it, it's basically a spotlight. So even with the wide angle lens, you get two lenses with it, it's not going to give you the same softness of light that a large softbox light is going to give you, because again, this is a small unit. But still, I mean, in terms of what you can do for shooting smaller objects and using it as a spot or a hard light for some situations, it's very useful. Now, in terms of pricing, this unit goes for about £70 on Kickstarter right now, which is about $110. It's going to cost about $140 after Kickstarter. So if you want this unit, now it's a good time to buy it. You can read our full review on LensVid.com.